What is up, New York? Welcome back to a new episode of New York State of Sports and IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. Ricky K here with you today for episode 74. Happy Martin Luther King Jr. Day, of course, everybody out there. Hope you're staying warm because it's bitterly cold here. What's bitterly cold has been the hot stove for both the Yankees and the Mets. The Mets still waiting to see what's happening with Pete Alonso. There's a lot of pessimism on the potential re-signing of Alonso. Why is that? We'll dive into that and what might be next for both Alonso and the Mets. Hall of Fame induction is tomorrow. We will preview that. The Jets reportedly getting a second interview with Aaron Glenn, their head coaching situation. We will dive into that and why the NFC Championship is a nightmare for the Giants, considering the Commanders and Eagles have played for the trip to the Super Bowl. We'll talk Knicks struggles before their matinee game this afternoon against the Hawks. We'll talk St. John's potentially getting ranked within the next hour after a big week for the Red Storm. Rutgers bounces back with a couple of huge wins. And then the NHL, Rangers are starting to find their form. Devils not so much. And the Islanders missing a golden opportunity this week. In addition, special guest interview coming up in the second segment. Coach Danielle McCartan from WFAN joins me to talk about some intriguing New York sports topics heading into 2025. It's all happening today on a special holiday episode of New York State of Sports. We will see you in just a minute. Of course, thank you once again for joining me here in New York State of Sports, IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. It is a little bit past the date, but I guess today would be our unofficial 1-year anniversary of doing this show. We've been done almost 75 episodes. Next week will be another milestone episode. So thanks to all those who tune in each and every week. Been really excited to be a part of this network as it goes into 2025. So I want to remind you, of course, you can follow us on X, IG, Facebook, TikTok, all that fun stuff at IE Sports Radio. Remember, go to our YouTube page. If you're here already, great. Hit like, subscribe. You get notifications for all of our shows that go on YouTube each and every day. IESportsRadio.com/New York State of Sports. That's where you want to go if you're looking to learn more about me, learn more about the show. Each show has its own page, so go to the website, check it out. If you missed any portion of the show or you just want to hear me talk again, you can download the podcast on Apple, Spreaker, Spotify, all that fun stuff. Wherever you get your podcast, chances are that's where you will find it. You can follow me on X at Rickinator555, or you can follow the show on X at NY State Sports IE. Usually I'm tweeting from there as well. Be sure to check that out today. So normally we've been doing football over the last couple of days or last few weeks. I wanted to lead with baseball today, of course, because we're about less than a month away from spring training, which is really exciting. Definitely with the cold weather today, I'm looking forward to actually warming up and talk about some spring training. So we'll dive into that coming up next. So you'll hear quickly from our sponsors, and we'll be right back in just a few minutes.
IE Sports Radio fans, this show is brought to you by Planet Jerky Premium Brisket Beef Jerky. Planet Jerky is the official jerky of the 2022 California League champion Lake Elsinore Storm, single-A affiliate of the San Diego Padres. This all-brisket jerky has gluten-free options, contains no MSG, no sodium nitrate, is low in sugar, and high in protein. Go to their website at planetjerky.net and follow them on Instagram at Planet Jerky. Planet Jerky, the jerky that's on a whole other planet.
rise and shine. It's 4 a.m. The stars are still out. The sun is beneath the horizon, but it's time to punch in and go to work. The comfort of your warm-ups turns into the grinding out of your reps as the clinking and the clanking of the plates create a symphony of euphoria. There's no other feeling like it. Earn it, burn it, and take what's yours. IE Sports Radio has proudly partnered with Vital Apparel, a brand that not only fits great, but also promotes and donates to mental health research. Use our code IESR to get 15% off their comfortable and inspiring gym wear and help them on their amazing journey to support mental health. Go hard, take part in your iron therapy, and be strong. Because when your mental health is as strong as you are, there's no telling how far you'll go.
A special thanks to Planet Jerky and Vital Apparel for their support of the show. Again, while you're watching the championship games this weekend, be sure to have some Planet Jerky Premium Brisket Beef Jerky. A lot of great flavors out there. And January is an important time to worry about your mental health. So be sure to use our code IESR to get 15% off that inspiring gym wear. Also, we have another sponsor, Raw Nutrition Supplements. Be sure to go to the website, getrawnutrition.com. Use our promo code IESR. You get 10% off some cool supplements. So be sure to check that out today. So like I said, we've been doing a lot of football to lead the show. And after our next commercial, you'll hear from Danielle McCartan from WFAN, my conversation with her, which was fantastic. And I think you're going to have a lot of the interesting debate about some of the questions that we brought up. We used it as more of a big picture New York 2025 kind of topics, including about the Mets and Yankees, which team is in the better position for 2025. And one of those guys that we're not sure if he's going to be a Met or not is Pete Alonso. This one I thought would be easy for the Mets because who else really wants him? And I think you're starting to see that because the Mets, I think, are looking at, well, Pete, nobody really is looking at you. All the first basemen are gone. And then you look at a big signing in play today, the Toronto Blue Jays, who are a team linked to Pete Alonso, go out and reportedly in the last hour signed Orioles outfielder Anthony Santander to a 5-year, about $90+ million contract with a club option. Now, that doesn't mean the Blue Jays can't make more moves, but Santander was one of the other big free agent on the market. So it's really just Pete Alonso and Alex Bregman. And I think a couple of things did not work in Pete Alonso's favor in this negotiation. And I was reading something, including Robert Murray from over on Fanside said, well, the Mets are still in play. I never think the Mets are out of play until Alonso actually goes somewhere else. I know there's been a lot of pessimism over the last week or so that he was going to re-sign. And I think part of Pete Alonso doesn't want to come crawling back to the Mets and taking a significantly lesser deal than what he thinks that he's worth. But the question is going to be, what is Pete actually worth? And there's a couple of things that are not in his favor. One, like I said, all the first basemen are off the market. Every team that needed a first baseman has practically gone somewhere else. The Yankees went out and they got Paul Goldschmidt. We've seen the Nathaniel Lowe trade to the Washington Nationals. We've seen Carlos Santana go to Cleveland. There's a lot of things that haven't worked in Pete's favor for a team that openly needs a first baseman. So that's been out of play. The Astros got Christian Walker. That's out of play. So there's a lot of things that have been not in the right direction, number one. Number two, there is a different GM in place than the one who drafted Pete Alonso. David Stearns has zero emotional attachment to Pete Alonso. David Stearns can let him go because I think the fan base has started to trust what David Stearns is doing and the plan that Stearns has in place to where if the Mets lose him, it's not doom and gloom. And I think Pete also thought, hey, I'm homegrown. Maybe the Mets will actually give me a little bit more because of what I bring outside of the game. Once you bring in Juan Soto, like the Mets did, and I think they're finding out what the Yankees found out last year. You could bring in Juan Soto, but what else can you do? And I think the Yankees thought that as well. Like if we give Juan Soto's lucrative contract, we're not be able to do that much more unless we're willing to go over the Steve Cohen tax and be like the Dodgers, which I'll go over in a minute why that signing shouldn't really affect the Mets and Yankees, but really should affect the rest of the sport. So that didn't work for him. And like Steve Cohen, I think Alonso's kind of hoping maybe the fan in Steve Cohen comes out and says, I'm going to get Pete Alonso because I know the fans really want him back. Steve Cohen is kind of trusting his president here. He's got to say, you know what? We'll see what happens. We'll see what the market dictates. So Pete was kind of hoping for that reckless spending that just isn't happening. And I think he's realized the mistake he made 2 years ago when he turned down that 7-year contract. He bet on himself, thought he could be Aaron Judge, thought he could be what some of these other guys that bet on themselves have turned out to be. It just didn't work. Pete's a good player. I won't say that Pete is and below average first base. I think he's a really good power hitter. But he also strikes out a lot. He's very streaky. He'll go through his stretches where he's hot for a couple weeks and he's cold for a couple weeks. And there's not that consistency out there. And at first base defensively, he's okay. He's not great. He's not that Gold Glove first baseman that's going to get X amount of money. I think he was hoping to be Freddie Freeman. He's not Freddie Freeman. He was hoping Scott Boras throughout the comparisons to Prince Fielder. He's not Prince Fielder. He was at a different age than Prince Fielder. Prince Fielder was in his late 20s when he got that lucrative contract in free agency. Alonso's in his early 30s. Like, that is not going to happen. And the question now is, okay, where do the Mets pivot? Let's say Alonso doesn't get signed. Now, I don't know where Alonso would go. I still think Toronto is really the only team that can go from. I don't buy into the Angels stuff. Although somebody's got to play with Mike Trout, I guess. The Red Sox have. I don't think the Red Sox would get him. There's just not that big connection. The Giants maybe. But okay, so Alonso doesn't have many other suitors. But if Alonso does find a suitor, maybe somebody gets hurt in spring training or something, what's the Mets' plan B? And to me, it's Mark Vientos. It's Mark Vientos at first base. I know people say we haven't seen a lot of Vientos. The games I've seen of Vientos, he actually looked like he's okay at the position. And you're still getting Vientos' power numbers. I think that would fit. I know people say, well, Vientos is more of a third baseman. But we were talking about last year his struggle, his adapting to third base. At least maybe you put Vientos at first. You don't really have to rely so much on his defense. That benefits. The Mets have a lot of internal options at third base. Do they go Brett Baty, who, again, I would argue that maybe they should move on from Baty and try to trade him. But the organization believed so much in Brett Baty last year. Did that change? Luis Angel Acuna. They have Ronnie Mauricio. They could put Jeff McNeil at third. Or you just go out there and find a third baseman. Maybe make a trade. Maybe you find a way to make different parts work. Maybe you sign a Jurickson Profar and you put Jeff McNeil at third base. There's so many options in play that I don't think the Mets are in panic mode if they don't get Pete Alonso. And the big picture question, if you don't get Pete Alonso, there's one guy in particular that the Mets could be looking for in 2025 in the offseason. And that's Vlad Jr. Doesn't sound like the Blue Jays are going to look to trade Vlad Jr. during this offseason. I know there was reports that Vlad Jr. had given the Blue Jays a deadline of spring training to get an extension done. We'll see if that ends up happening. But that's a guy I think team want to pay for. Now, Vlad has kind of said he won't play for a team like the Yankees, but you never know when the money comes in. And if the Mets end up not having to pay Alonso, maybe Vlad Jr. is the play. And you put him with Juan Soto for the next 5 to 10 years. And that might actually work in their favor. So a lot of different things at play. I don't think the Mets are in a full-blown panic mode when it comes to making this deal, but I think still it's losing it. If you lose Alonso, you're still losing a key piece of this franchise in some way, shape, or form. Now, does it cripple the team's chances of winning? Absolutely not. But it would be a big loss from a heartfelt standpoint because of what Pete means to this team, because of the home run hit against Devin Williams and against the Brewers last year in the playoffs. He had those big hits that kind of make this decision a lot more tougher than it would have been otherwise. Now, the Mets did go out and make a big move this week. They did sign A.J. Minter to help their bullpen, 2 years, $22 million. And when you look at Minter, he's a very good setup option. Last year, he had a 2.62 ERA in 39 games, did battle some injuries. But outside of last season, he's appeared in 60 games each of the last 3 seasons. He's a guy that can get some saves if you need him to. But before last year, he had 11 plus strikeouts per 9 in the 2 prior seasons. And what the Mets needed to get this offseason for their bullpen was a 8th inning option to Edwin Diaz. And I think they've done that here with Minter. These guys pitch in the division. He knows the NL East. He's got a good track record. And they get him for pretty much on the cheap. And he's going to be only 32 in September. I know bullpen arms can be fickle, but you talk about a piece that could work. Now, what I think the Mets would have rather did is the Tanner Scott stuff. Tanner Scott signed a 4-year, $72 million deal with the Dodgers. The Dodgers added Roki Sasaki this week. They've added so many things. I know people are saying it's bad for the sport, and I agree. But you wouldn't be saying this if you're a New York fan and the Mets and Yankees did these moves. I don't think any Met or Yankee fan should be outright disgusted. I think the sport should be disgusted because any owner could do this and no owner decides to do it. I would argue if there's going to be a salary cap in baseball, there should be a floor because you're seeing teams just not spend a dime. And the one thing you got to give the credit for the Dodgers is they're going out there and they're trying to win. They don't care that their payroll with the luxury tax penalty is going to be close to $500 million. They're trying to win. They're trying to win back-to-back World Series. They got a team that, according to FanDuel, I think the win over under now is 103.5. It's a super team. No question about it. It's going to make the road a lot tougher for the Mets to get past the NLCS and go to the World Series. But the outrage shouldn't be with the Dodgers. It should be with the rest of the ownership groups in baseball. Go spend money. You want to win, spend money. Don't try to make the teams that go out there and just try to get to 500 or a little bit over and hope the playoffs are a crapshoot and you find a way to get in. Like, I don't get why more teams don't build the way that the Dodgers are building. Because you have the resources. And I think that's why the players get so frustrated. It's like you're seeing the same 4 or 5 teams make moves. Mets and Yankees included. Mets and Yankees have done a lot of moves. So you talk about the last couple of weeks, they only really have a couple of moves to make. And they're very small. Once Alonso is off the market, there's not really much else the Mets need to do. And the Yankees, we talked about for weeks, really just need to get another infielder. And that could shape out in the next couple of weeks. Maybe they go out and they sign a bullpen piece or two. But there's not a major move left. But really, I think the outrage needs to do with the rest of baseball. Because of the Tanner Scott stuff. You're telling me no other team could pay Tanner Scott that money? You're telling me a team like the Cubs, who apparently offered 4 for $66. Now, Adam Karnick will talk about it tonight on Chi-Town Weekly. Like, you tell me the Cubs couldn't make that move? You tell me the Red Sox couldn't make that move? Nobody else would give Tanner Scott that money? Like, I don't understand it. And you gave the Dodgers the one piece they needed. Now, one more quick baseball note. Hall of Fame induction is tomorrow, 6 o'clock Eastern MLB Network. And what's been cool about this ballot is I was looking up last week, there are a lot of ex-Mets and ex-Yankees on this ballot. There are 13 players out of the 28 that have played at least one season in New York. I could list them off like real quick. Beltran, Curtis Granderson, Andrew Jones, Brian McCann, Andy Pettitte, A-Rod, K-Rod, CC, Ichiro, Tulowitzki, Billy Wagner, Bobby Abreu, and David Wright. And some are going to have a real, like Ichiro is going to get in first ballot. And remember what he was with the Yankees, did a pretty good job in the couple of years he was here. When he got traded from Seattle, wanted to get a chance to be in a contender in the World Series. Did not happen for him, unfortunately. But the couple of guys that really focus on, to me, for this ballot are going to be two. It's going to be CC Sabathia and Billy Wagner. CC Sabathia, I think, is going to get in on the first ballot. When you look at pitchers, nobody's really getting to 300 wins anymore. CC gets 250 wins over the course of his 19-year career. And you think about what he was with the Yankees. He was everything as advertised when he came to the Bronx because he was a leader in the clubhouse, which the Yankees desperately needed at the time after missing the playoffs in 2008. 2008, CC goes in that magic run with the Brewers, gets them to the playoffs, pitches on short rest seemingly every day in September. But CC goes 19-8 in 2009, wins 21 games in 2010, of course, wins a World Series with the Yankees, finishes in the top 4 of the Cy Young 3 times, makes 3 All-Star teams. He was an ace. He was a guy I'd be very comfortable giving the ball to, handled New York very well. And I hope he gets in the Hall of Fame because he was a tough guy to face. I mean, go back to 2007 when he was with Cleveland, when the Yankees lost to the then Cleveland Indians in that short series, in that division series. Very tough guy to face. And the other guy that's, I think, in the microscope is Billy Wagner. Billy Wagner, to me, when I was looking at, it's a really interesting stat on Wagner. He has finished in the top 10 in saves 10 times. He has never led the league in saves. So that is a really weird thing to be in the top 10 in saves 10 times and never lead the league. Now, it didn't help him that he was second in 2006 when he was with the Mets. And the one guy that was ahead of him, of course, is in the Hall of Fame, and that's Trevor Hoffman. But when you think about Billy Wagner, you think about a guy that still was a tough guy to face in his career in terms of saves. Now, he never had more than 44 saves in the season. Back in 2003. But he went to the Mets in 2006. He had 40 saves. 2007, he had 34. And, of course, the Mets made that push to the World Series in 2006 before losing Game 7 to the Cardinals. And then, of course, 2007 and 2008 have been unfortunate members for the collapses that the Mets had. But Wagner wasn't quite Astros dominant, but still had his good moments of dominance. So I hope he gets in, just because to me, he's the third best generation. The third best closer in this generation behind Mo and behind Trevor Hoffman. And they're both in the Hall. So I think Wagner, to me, deserves to get in. I could throw a couple other guys like A-Rod with the steroid stuff. Again, I come from the belief that you can't keep out an entire era, and there has to be some kind of thing. But A-Rod did get suspended by baseball, so it makes things a little bit trickier for him. I would still make a case for Andy Pettitte, even though he admitted to HGH. I still think you can't ignore the fact that Andy Pettitte was one of the best big game postseason pitchers in baseball history. Remember, he won every clinching game in 2009 for the Yankees. They're not winning titles without Andy Pettitte. And I think, to me, that he's not going to have the win total you would like, but he was one of the better guys in this day and age. David Wright, I think, just not enough years. Or you can make an argument for him. But a lot of ex-Yankees, ex-Mets on these ballots. We could go through a bunch of them, but to me, that make a lot of sense. Taryn's in the house today. Taryn Rodriguez. How are you, man? Yep, great time for the anniversary. Larry B's hanging out on this holiday. And Ralph, of course, was at an event yesterday with Carlos Mendoza. I think it was in Westchester, I believe. A longtime Met fan asked him if Pete can come back to get Pete back to play first. Mendoza had a candid look on his face, and I yelled out, "Yeah, it will be Vientos." He looked over me and cracked a smile. I will say the polar bear is gone. Again, I would think it's possible he's gone. I still would lean toward he's gone, but until he signs somewhere else, it's hard to really ignore, because who else are the suitors out there? I don't know. I can't pretend to know that. And especially with Santander going to the Blue Jays, Toronto's got a lot of money, but are they going to be willing to pay both Santander and Alonso? We'll see. But you can, if you're Toronto, put Pete at first and move Vlad to third. And Vlad is a more comfortable third baseman than first baseman. So that is an option for them, but we'll see it down the line. So we'll take a quick break. We'll come back and we'll play our special interview with Danielle McCartan from WFAN. And I think you're going to really enjoy that. So stay tuned. We'll be right back with that interview in just a minute.
Hey there, IE Sports Radio fans. Be sure to check out our sponsor, Seal the Deal Wax Seals by Cecilia B. You just finished your very own wedding or baby shower invitations and you're looking for that extra special touch? Maybe you just wrote a letter to a relative or a friend and you want to add to their smile when they receive it. Then seal the deal with Cecilia's handmade sealing wax stamps for your invitations, letters, and gifts. You bring the deal, we'll bring the seal. You can find them on Instagram at @sealthedeal_wax stamps and on Facebook, Seal the Deal Wax Seals.
For the last 10 years, IE Sports Radio has been bringing you amazing content ranging from interviewing legendary athletes, coaches, and other authorized media personnel to building tailor-made shows dedicated to all major sports cities around the country. Make sure to follow us at IE Sports Radio on X, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube to keep up with the latest in sports and with all of our shows. Also, make sure to check out our daily updated website at iesportsradio.com. At iesportsradio.com, you can see our daily show schedule and check out all of our show pages with personal bios to learn a little bit more about each of our awesome hosts. In addition to our show pages, you can catch the IE Sports Radio blog, Hall of Fame, Fans of the Month page, and our merchandise shop, including t-shirts, tank tops, caps, long sleeves, hoodies, and more. For now over a decade here at IE Sports Radio, we've continued to be by the fans, for the fans, and we thank you all for your support and for making IE Sports Radio your direct feed for all that is sports.
And welcome back here in New York State of Sports and IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. Ricky K back with you with another great special guest here on The Fan. And she's got one of the more entertaining shows when she's on. The monologues are great. Figured to have her on to talk some big pictures, New York sports in 25. Coach Danielle McCartan in the house. Danielle, how are you?
Yeah, doing well. How do you like the new studio setup I got going on here?
I am liking that. I got that saved Subway plaque somewhere, so that is fantastic.
That's still getting used to it.
Oh no, of course. So we're getting into big picture stuff. But before we get into that, I want the listeners here that haven't been familiar with you to hear about you a little bit. How would you describe your journey in this business?
I mean, how long is this podcast? I'm just kidding. I would say, look, I've never said no to an opportunity pretty much ever in any way, shape, or form. I've taught myself so many things. I've invested a lot of my own money into either growing myself professionally or with these professional studio lights that I now have as of last week. So it's a lot of investment in time. It's a lot of investment in dollars. But it never feels like work. You know, it's like you do something you love, that old adage, and it never feels like work. And I mean, the best part about being on The Fan is just connecting with the listeners, whether it's on the phone or, you know, I go out to games often, you know, you've seen, and the best part is like, hey, are you Danielle from The Fan? Like, yeah. Oh my God, I love your show. Like, that's the coolest thing. So just being able to connect with the audience and just, you know, the journey itself has been 10 years. It's been a little over 10 years, doing a lot of things by myself first in order to try to get noticed. And then once I was noticed, it's just been about, okay, how can I get to the next level? What's the next thing I can do? So it's a continual, I don't know, battle. I don't want to say battle. That's a negative connotation, but it's a continual improvement, self-improvement, and then hoping for situational improvement, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Be sure to check out her work. It's fantastic. So it's one of the rising stars, I think, in this business. So let's look at the big picture New York sports topics, and we'll keep it with football because that's been the news lately. So with all the strife in New York football, who actually has the more dysfunctional organization, the Giants or the Jets?
I wouldn't call the Giants dysfunctional. I don't know if I would call them that. The answer, I was talking to somebody today, actually. The answer is absolutely the New York Jets. I mean, the draft is coming up in just a couple months. The Jets don't have the guy in place who's going to pick the people. They don't have the guy in place who's going to coach the people. And they maybe don't even have a quarterback moving forward. So dysfunction. I mean, at least the Giants aren't using Madden ratings to pick make trades and evaluate players. I mean, that is the epitome of dysfunction. You got 18-year-old kids playing Madden, telling daddy what they want to do and not do in the trade market. I mean, that to me is the absolute umpteenth degree of dysfunction. Absolutely, the answer is the New York Jets.
I don't disagree with you because I think the Jets are up there. Here be my argument for the Giants. Sure. I think at least Woody Johnson made moves. I think John Mara he made him too early, but I think he made moves. John Mara to me is the parent that threatens to punish you, but doesn't really want to punish you. And I've never seen a team go 3-14, and maybe the only thing they do is change the defensive coordinator because he might want to go follow Rabel in New England, or change the offensive coordinator. It just seems like the Giants are in this constant state of denial, and Mara being afraid to make moves. Woody doesn't seem to care what people think of him. Mara seems to think what people think of him because he doesn't want to keep making changes. Neither is great. I kind of agree with you, but you can make the argument the Giants are not far off.
Woody Johnson is absolutely reading the tweets and all of that. There's no way he doesn't care. He cares a lot. But the other thing about what people think about him, I mean, I would say the Giants, on the record, I mean, I believe Dable deserves another shot. I would not have brought Joe Shane back, but I wouldn't call it dysfunction. I would almost call it like you said, denial or loyalty to a fault, or not wanting to make a change for the sake of making a change. So, yeah, you used the word dysfunctional, and that is absolutely the New York Jets circus that happens every year at Florham Park, no doubt. Let me get my popcorn ready.
So let's throw another one out there since we're on the Jet topic. Who do you want to be the next Jet coach and general manager?
Yeah, I mean, look, they've interviewed everybody. Like, how many interviews have they done so far? I mean, they've the college coaches, the guy from Maryland that he had like a losing record. I mean, what are they doing? You know what I mean? What are they doing? So, I mean, there's names that we know, names that we don't know. What I would say is the next coach of the New York Jets, I would like to have Aaron Rodgers back. So I would like a guy that is willing to work with Aaron Rodgers and work with him, not against him. And I know I'm in the minority opinion with that. I believe Aaron Rodgers was a lot more injured than people are leading on to, or even he led on to this season. So next head coach, I don't want to say like a name because then I'm pigeonholed into the name. I want an established guy. I want a guy that's been there, done that, won. I want a guy that's an offensive mind. Ben Johnson's probably going to be a great coach one day, and all these hotshot coordinators maybe will be great coaches one day, but it's not the right fit for this Jets team right now. That's what I think. So I just want someone to come in there, establish. I mean, maybe I'll give you a name. I love the idea of Pete Carroll coming in. I love the idea. He's open to the dysfunction of Chicago. Why not the New York Jets? Pete Carroll probably would be my number one choice, honestly. And I know he's old and all that, but I like him. I would like him.
Yeah, first I've heard of Carroll. I actually like that opinion as well. I think he's a guy that fits. I think if they're going to go non-experience, I like experience. I think would be number one.
Yeah.
I think New York experience matters. And you're seeing Carlos Mendoza seems to pick all the Yankees to come join the Mets.
Words right out of my mouth. Yes, good for you.
And to me, that would be Aaron Glenn, because maybe he doesn't have the coach experience, but he's got the New York experience. He kind of knows the player what to expect. Yeah. And I don't think he would say anything stupid. And I think that to me would help.
I agree that the New York experience is paramount, right? But I thought I saw a tweet that the Jets interviewed Steve Spagnuolo. That is a guy comes from a winning pedigree who has New York experience. I know he's defensive minded, but if they're going that route, New York experience, he'd be my guy. Aaron Glenn, I just don't think the Jets can get behind somebody that has no head coach experience yet again, for fear of going all the way down the drain. So I would say experience is necessary. And I think Steve Spagnuolo, with his credentials, would bring immediate credibility to the Jets.
I agree with you on Spags also. I think it's time he gets another shot, and he's been too good of a defensive coordinator to not do that. So you mentioned Rodgers, which I agree. I think by default, if he wants to come back, he's coming back.
Sure.
So since you gave that prediction on the Jets, we don't hold you to predictions. If you're wrong, it's okay.
Yeah.
Giant quarterback in 25 is who?
Who I want it to be or who it will be. Those are two different.
Either way.
I mean, who it will be, I think, is Shedeur Sanders. Who I want it to be, Kirk Cousins. I just think that the Giants and I get calls all the time. They call me crazy, but I know this is not the majority opinion, but the Giants are not a quarterback away. There's not one single quarterback, Joe Montana reincarnated, Tom Brady on this team that will lead this team to success. The Giants have many more holes to fill before they can plug and play a quarterback in there. I mean, all of their quarterbacks were injured this season. Does anybody realize that? What is going to happen to Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward or insert any quarterback there? Like, these guys had experience in their system. Jones, DeVito, Locke, and they're still getting pummeled. So like you bring a rookie quarterback in at NFL speed, it's just a setup for failure. So I think the Giants need to build it out the right way, not jump the gun on a quarterback. But why I think they're going to is because Joe Schoen, Brian Daboll, I know Shane said he wasn't going to be in self-preservation mode, but there's no doubt in my mind, if you're choosing between, myself having a career or the future of this franchise 10 years down the road, I'm picking myself, I'll be honest. So I think that's why the Giants are going to end up with Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward or any of these quarterbacks. And I don't think they're going to do the right thing in finding themselves a bridge quarterback so that they could build out their roster. Their defense is terrible. The offensive line is one of the worst in the league. I mean, what are you going to do? What can you realistically expect from a rookie quarterback with this team assembled around him? And the schedule next year, have you seen it? 5 wins maximum for this Giants team next year. 5.
That's why I would have cleaned house with both of them, because the schedule is so bad. Yeah. And you're going to have to move. Like if Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll pick quarterback, both of them are going to want extra years.
That's right.
To me, I would have got the cart ahead of the horse and said, well, you had a quarterback. You wanted to call plays. That's what you get. To me, I think it probably is a rookie. I like your Cousins' take. I think it's free agent quarterback's just bad. Like I don't want Sam Darnold here. Like every time I watched Sam Darnold against the Rams, every time he made a certain face, it looked like the ghost face from the Jets Patriots game whenever something bad happens. So I can't be sold on Sam Darnold in New York. It just won't work.
Me neither.
So let's look at some other big picture in New York. Let's go to baseball. Pete Alonso's still waiting. I think Pete Alonso, if he ends up signing, another team is going to look back and say, what the heck did I do? Yeah. But we have to look at it right now.
Right now.
Who's better in 25? Mets or Yankees?
I mean, that's a good question because they're both good. They're both good teams. The Mets need Alonso back, and Soto and in Queens needs Alonso back. The Yankees need a third baseman. Bregman needs to be that guy that they bring in there. I think the Yankees have a better pitching staff, starters, relievers. So better team is a hard question, but as of right now, I'd have to go Yankees only because pitching wins championships, basically. And Cole, Fried, Rodon is much better than Manaea. And Senga, is his arm even ready? Bullpen, who's in the bullpen? It's a hard question because they're both going to be good. But if you had to have me pick right now, I would say the Yankees have a better team right now, even with the Mets having Juan Soto on their team. He's got no protection in the lineup as of today with no Alonso.
I would say Yankees just because they address more needs, and I think the path is easier. Like I think you look at I look at baseball. Every free agent apparently wants to go to the National League. Why I don't know, because and if Sasaki goes to the National League or this guy goes to the National League, like nobody wants to go to the AL outside like Yusei Kikuchi and whoever signed to the Yankees. So even if like Bregman goes to Boston or Detroit or whatever, the path is just so easy. Like the Mets that go through the Braves, the Phillies, the Dodgers, the Padres, the Giants, the road of Cubs maybe in there, whoever. The path is just so easier for the Yankees, and then having the Mets to follow what they did a year ago. Now to be the hunted, the Mets past is never being the hunters. The hunted, they're usually the hunters. That's interesting.
And I took it as the question as like roster construction.
Yeah, right.
The path is a lot easier for the Yankees to get where they want to be, for sure, no doubt. Especially with Ohtani being back with the bat in his hand and the ball in his hand. So, roster construction wise, though, I'd still pick the Yankees. I agree.
I would too. I think I think having Manaea back makes the roster construction closer. Yeah. I just think that if the Mets got Tanner Scott, maybe that would change a little bit because now there's a bridge to Diaz.
Right.
So New York, New Jersey athlete you were most intrigued to follow this year?
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I saw the email and just a little while ago, and I was like, man, I don't know. My mind almost went to like one from every team, and I know we don't have time for that, but I would probably say most intriguing would be Max Fried. I mean, that contract is humongous. He has injury history. It's well documented. Can he be that true number 2 guy or 1A or 1B guy to Garrett Cole? Garrett Cole, I think a lot of Yankee fans take for advantage. Take what's the word? What's the expression? Take
For granted.
Yeah, they take Garrett Cole for granted because he's always there on every fifth day. He takes the ball for the most part, except for the beginning of last year. So I'd be intrigued to see what Max Fried could bring to this rotation and how lights out he could be, because his fielding independent pitching number is better than Garrett Cole's, which is eye-popping when you really think about it. And then for the Mets, I would say most intriguing to me for the Mets is going to be the development of, I guess, of Mark Vientos and how they use him defensively. He had a breakout offensively, this season, but where are they going to play him? He was taking ground balls at third base. Okay, but does that mean Pete Alonso is going to be coming back? And then if so, then what happens? Or if not, then first base, is that a really good fit for him? So I would be intrigued to follow the development of Mark Vientos for the Mets and Francisco Alvarez too. But Mark Vientos, he had a really breakout season. Can he follow it up this year again?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Vientos' bat, and I would say the Mets would have won the division had Vientos been the starting third baseman and not Brett Beatty. That's something that they took too long to figure out.
Yep.
To me, I think you look at two things, and I'm going to go outside of baseball. The popular athlete route, I'm going to go Jalen Brunson.
Yeah.
I think it's still amazing to me that nobody votes for him for the All-Star game, but he just carries the team night in, night out with like 50-point games. And now he can actually be healthy for a playoffs if they pass the first round, they get through, play the Celtics. I think seeing his evolution and trying to get the Knicks further. And an outside the radar pick, Jack Hughes. If the Devils
can thinking him too. Yeah, I was.
Because the Devils at least now are in a position like they're 15 points ahead of whoever's fourth. They're going to be in the playoff. If the Devils can keep advancing and we're looking for that next star in New York in hockey that isn't a goalie, Jack Hughes is probably that guy with a coach that has been in the playoffs. And this town, I think, even though the New Jersey sports never, like the Nets never got the big following when they made him, people I think would get behind Jack Hughes because he's a number one pick and because he's that talented.
Yeah. And I would almost kind of counter with a Nico Hischier too, because they're like a 1-2 punch. I mean, I was thinking Jack Hughes as I was coming up with this. I was like, Jack Hughes. I would also say Aaron Rodgers too, because I mean, listen, he's intriguing to follow. I mean, I'm watching the Netflix documentary. Everybody has he's an intriguing human being. And now, okay, what's going to be his next career move? Will he stay in New York Jet? Will he end his career in New York Jet? Will he retire? Will he go somewhere else? I think that for me is also intriguing. And I know that's kind of like an obvious answer, so I didn't want to say that, but I'll say it now.
The Aaron Rodgers stuff is interesting on a different level, intriguing on a different level, because I mean, you look at his season overall, big picture, he ended the year pretty well. I think that's what people will tend to forget about. It's like outside of the Garrett Wilson stuff, and maybe Breece Hall getting the ball a little bit more, the offense was fine when they weren't committing 10-yard penalties left and right. So
when the defense wasn't giving up 6 times fourth quarter lead. I mean, that was the real problem, was the offense really wasn't the problem for the Jets. And I wish more people would see that instead of trying to run Aaron Rodgers out of town. I think the Jets are a contender with him on the team next year.
So with so many New York teams in contention, we said player, what's the team that's the most intriguing?
Team that's most intriguing. I mean, on a different level, I'd say the Rangers, honestly, because they're intriguing because what the heck's going on over there? They still have all these stars that are still playing on a nightly basis. And this looks like a shell of the team that it was last season. So on a different level, on a non-positive level, I would say the Rangers are really intriguing because what the hell's going on over there? But I mean, no, I don't think anybody has the answers. Is it coaching? Is it the players not being motivated? Have they fallen off? There's so many different questions that surround this team that if they don't figure it out soon, it's not going to be a good look for them. They're going to be out sooner rather than later.
See, that's the thing. I agree with you on that. And I've always questioned what the GM was going to do. But the problem is the East is so bad. They're 4 points out and they're almost in last, where it's like, okay, they're going to just keep going just to keep going.
Yep. But
Igor can only do so much, and then you'll get bought in. The Rangers are the 8th seed, but they have Igor. That's like the mixed messaging from Drury, and I think maybe just Dolan has now bothering the Rangers because he can't bother the Knicks so much.
Yeah, and you know what? It's almost like, okay, trade deadline, Are the Rangers going to be sellers? There's no way they're going to be sellers, right? But if they're that far out, why wouldn't they be sellers? And which pieces would move? That's to me why they're also very, on another level, also intriguing to see.
And which want to move. I think it's not that what they can move, it's which want to move, because they have so many with the no roster movement situations. It's crazy. Yeah. So favorite sport and favorite athlete growing up, Pusu?
A lot of people are surprised to know that I actually played baseball with the boys, and I was better than all of them up until freshman year, where they made me switch to softball. But I was an all-star at 3 different positions: pitcher, first base, and shortstop as a baseball player. And I was also the only kid on my Marlins, my Dumont Marlins, that was never called up to the big little leagues. I had to play my whole entire career in the minor leagues, and I'll let you figure out why that was, what it was. But I experienced sexism at a young age, and I dealt with it, and I know I was good because when I tried out for softball as a freshman, day one of tryouts, you had to try out with the freshman team in your age range, and then they were like, "Can you stay for the varsity tryout too?" I was a starting shortstop freshman year of high school, so it wasn't because I wasn't good, So I would say baseball. I love the game within the game. I coach softball. That's kind of my sport. I was just talking the other day about when you're a kid and you have to pick, you have to decide which way you're going to go, which sport you're going to really commit your time to. For me, that was the choice between baseball/softball and basketball. And I'm glad I picked what I picked. And then, of course, I was born in 1988. The Yankees were good. I was on the Yankees for T-ball. I wore number 7. And I was like, "Dad, who's number 7 for the Yankees?" And he was like, "Oh, that number's retired." What does that mean? Mickey Mantle. So I became a Yankee fan, I guess, from a really young age. And so obviously as a shortstop myself, I love the position. Derek Jeter. My first game was in 1996 when he was a rookie, and I was at his last game. And he probably would be the player I would most try to emulate on the field.
And your favorite sports moment?
Ever, as a witness with my own eyes?
Yeah, well, let's go with that.
I know my schema is activated to Yankees and Jeter, but that last game was something else. His last game, I couldn't predict how I was going to. I cried in the stands. Like, who does that? But everybody was crying around me. So just to see that and have him come out, we were in section 232B, I think. I still remember the section, and had to have him come out and, kneel by shortstop. And it's like, you couldn't help but be sitting in that seat and thinking like, wow, this is like seeing Babe Ruth do this, or seeing Mantle do this, or any of those legendary Yankees, or Berra. So to me, I think that probably was the most poignant, most memorable, I was there kind of moment in my short life here so far.
Yeah, unfortunately, I wasn't at that game. I was at the second to last game because I was like, I got to buy a ticket. I never seen a stadium not really care about the game. And then when Jeter's up, everybody just started standing up and then caring about the game. And then it's like, oh, we're going to sit back down after the bat's over.
Yeah.
Like I think him and Mo, kind of like reflected that in a way. Because Mo was my guy growing up. I was a big Rivera guy. Yeah. So like just the way he carried himself and things like that. So to me, like the Jeter stuff, you never really, I don't think the next generation is going to really understand what the impact of those guys.
Well, you know what? I think they will eventually, because Aaron Judge will be a Yankee for life. And I think that moment is going to be very similar to the Mariano moment and the Jeter moment. And, when it's all said and done, I hope I'm at that game too, because I love Aaron Judge. He is a good man. He's a great player. And when it's all said and done, he might go down as one of the best to ever do it, but he's got to pick it up in the postseason.
So before I let you go, how the listeners can follow you on social media, what you got going on, anything you want to plug, feel free to do so.
Yeah, I guess all the social media channels, it's like a part-time job, as you probably know, managing these social media channels. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of time, but it's at Coach MCCARTAN. You can see it. Oh, yeah, right there on the screen. I'm still getting used to the directions here. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. I'm also on TikTok. We'll see for how long. And I don't even know. I can't believe I actually even did it. But I when I have a show coming up, I post it on there. I let everybody know on the Thursday before it. As far as anything else, I'll let you know what my next show on The Fan is. I'll post it up on the Thursday prior.
Yeah, be sure to check that out. Great stuff. Her monologues are fantastic. Be sure to check those out. Danielle, thanks for hopping on. Keep up the great work, and we'll talk again soon. Thank you.
Sure. And if anybody wants to catch up and doesn't know, they could just go on like Google like WFAN on demand and then type McCartan in, and all the monologues will come up, so they can get a sense of my style and all that. So, Ricky, I appreciate you having me on, and we'll do it again soon.
Be sure to check it out, and we'll be right back with more New York State sports after this.
What's up, Pittsburgh? This is Ralph Galise, the host of the Injury Report on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. Are you that passionate diehard Steelers, Penguins, Pirates, or just a Pittsburgh sports fan? Then please join me on the Injury Report every Tuesday on IE Sports Radio, the direct feed for all that is sports, and I will update you on all that's black and gold, and have you telling your Pittsburgh fans and friends what's up with Pittsburgh sports. Tune in Tuesday with me, Ralph Galise, the Injury Report on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. Let's go!
Everybody, this is Darren Rodriguez. Are you a fan of volleyball? Are you a fan of Thunder Spikes? Then I have the show for you, Set Point, where I cover NCAA men's and women's volleyball, high school boys and girls volleyball, beach volleyball, and even professional volleyball. Catch the action every week here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
A special thanks to Danielle McCarty from WFAN. I hope you enjoyed that interview just as much as I did conducting it. So many great topics, the great energy. And if you haven't answered any of those topics, feel free to comment here on YouTube. I'd be really interested to hear what you guys think is the most intriguing athlete to follow in New York this year, because it was a real interesting topic to really dive into. Because you never know what's going to happen this year. By the way, a couple of quick things. Scott Mitchell from TSN reporting that Pete Alonso is still in play for the Blue Jays. So that'll be something to check out. And we'll have more on St. John's coming up, but they are officially ranked. They are 20th in the AP poll, which is fantastic. Highest ranking since 2014-15, and really special year for them so far. We'll dive into that a little bit later toward the end of the show. I know we're going a little longer than the hour today, but we wanted to bring you that interview because, again, thank you to Danielle. She was excellent. I'm running out of superlatives how much I enjoyed that interview. Well, let's talk Jets to start off with. We go back to the NFL. Aaron Glenn, reportedly, Mike Garafolo, Albert Breer, all the insiders had it today. Aaron Glenn is going to be the first of the 16 or 17 candidates to get a second interview. We heard Joe Witt got a first interview, the defensive coordinator of the Commanders, over the weekend. We've seen interviews with Brian Flores and Josh McCown and all these things. Aaron Glenn will get an interview. If not, I think it's supposed to be tomorrow. So he will interview with the Jets first. If nothing happens tomorrow, he will interview with the Saints on Wednesday. Look, I still think this is the guy, I especially with Rabel out. I know people say, well, look, Ricky, what happened with the Lions over the weekend. And I can look at that and say the Lions were severely banged up on defense. And while the defense was the reason they lost to Jaden Daniels, who looked so poised in that game, it's so impressive. Jared Goff made some really dumb throws. And Ben Johnson, the OC, got a little bit too cute with the Jameson Williams pass. Aaron Glenn's not the sole reason they lost that game. And I don't think one game defines a head coach. I still think when you look at Aaron Glenn as a coach, I think for what he lacks in head coach experience, I think he makes up for, as I said in that interview, and I've said in the past, in New York experience. I think he's a guy who really wants this job. I think there's something to that, especially with all the uncertainty and all the stuff with Aaron Rodgers and who's the quarterback and whatnot. You can tell when you watch that Lions team that players play for Aaron Glenn. And you can tell the passion he brings, the energy he brings. And again, you get the right offensive coach in place. I think it makes up for it. I know people say, well, the Jets just did this with the defensive hire with Robert Saleh. I think Aaron Glenn is a unique candidate. I mean, he's one I would really be interested to see who he pairs with. Because if you look at the alternatives, I'm not hiring Matt Nagy. I'm not hiring Arthur Smith. If those are the alternatives and Brian Flores isn't considered, Brian Flores to be up there for me, if you really wanted to go out of the box, I'm surprised that nobody's tried to go get Cliff Kingsbury. Or maybe the Commanders being still there, or nobody's trying, the Jets aren't trying for McCarthy. Because Danielle brought a good point with Spagnuolo, and I was thinking about this. The Chiefs are the one team nobody wants to ever poach their assistants. Like, the Lions are going to lose both their assistants in this head coaching cycle. And we saw in the Chiefs are compared most to the Patriots, and how many times the Patriots had assistant coaches leave and the brain drain hyped in. Nobody ever wants to brain drain the Chiefs. I mean, the enemy took forever and a day to get anything. And Matt Nagy, I guess the Bears experience still haunts him. Nobody wants Spagnuolo because of the stuff with the Rams, even though Spagnuolo is a Hall of Fame defensive coordinator. If you want to beat the Chiefs, why don't you try to take their assistants? I don't ever understand. Maybe it's Patrick Mahomes makes those guys. I have no clue. But on a side note, again, I think the Jets are doing this the right way. I know it's frustrating for people. They've talked to like 17 candidates. They're doing it the right way. It's trying to be patient, trying to understand the cycle. There's the rumors that a lot of guys are linking the Jets to the assistant Packers GM. Like, everyone liked the Mike Greenberg hire not the hire, but the interview with Mike Greenberg, who was in the front office in Tampa. And then a lot of people were linking them, at least with the Packers. Now, the name of the vice president of player personnel, John Eric Sullivan. And there was a report there was a quote from GM Brian Gutekunst saying that he'll be missed. Now, the Titans, who were in the market for the GM thing, was they hired Mike Berganzi from the Chiefs, which would have been my pick for the GM of the Jets. But so we're looking at maybe hopefully hires to talk about next week's show. I think that would be the play. Again, right now with Aaron Glenn being the first, there'll be others that get second interviews, I'm sure. I think to me, Aaron Glenn is still the number one candidate in my mind, just because I think for the lack of certainty, there's something there. Now, the Giants have some interesting news on their hands. Mike Kafka is reportedly getting to get a second interview with the Saints this week. Now, Kafka wasn't the guy calling plays last year, and he was identified as the offensive coordinator of the Giants. He's going to get a chance to coach in the Senior Bowl. Giants will also have assistants coaching the East-West Shrine Bowl. So they're going to get some look at some of the top prospects in the NFL draft. And look, Brian Daboll, to me, isn't going to call plays next year. I wouldn't have him do that. If they kept him around, I'm not having him call nothing, because I want Brian Daboll focused on solely being a head coach and not a play caller. So Mike Kafka, be interested to see if he does end up getting the Saints job. I still think it could be Mike McCarthy, but we'll see. Saints job is still open. Bears job is still open. Jaguars job is still open. Raiders job is still open. But because the Lions getting knocked out early, you're going to start to see head coaching moves probably the next week or so. And if you're a Giants fan, I'm interested in this. Who are you rooting for in the NFC title game? That is the Giants' worst nightmare, is what's happening right now. Because you can say, well, who do you root for? Because the Eagles have Saquon Barkley. I think it's easier. Like, yes, you hate the Eagles, but I know a lot of Giant fans are actually rooting for Saquon to do well. He had a really great game yesterday with 200 yards, and Nick Sirianni almost blows that game because he wants Jalen Hurts to do a play-action pass on 2nd and 7 when Hurts was not right in that game at all. It still hasn't looked right since returning. He got bailed out by the weather. I think if the snow isn't there, the Rams actually probably win that game. But I would say the worst nightmare out of the two that would win is the Commanders. Because the Giants could be where the Commanders are for a lack of one thing. They didn't tank. Think about all those games. Everybody was happy that Tommy DeVito was winning, and everybody was thrilled that he was being this folk hero, local quarterback, whatever. Him winning those meaningless football games cost the Giants Jayden Daniels. Like Jayden Daniels, the Heisman Trophy winner, has looked as composed and as poised as any rookie quarterback that we've seen in a long time. He's going to be the playing a conference championship game, something we haven't seen since in a rookie season. Something we haven't seen since Sanchez and Flacco. Roethlisberger, I know, has done it. But Dan Quinn puts all the faith in him. And you think about not just Jayden Daniels, but who's running the Commanders? Adam Peters. Guess who was the runner-up to the Giants GM job when Joe Schoen got hired? Adam Peters. Adam Peters, who came from San Francisco, to me would have been the guy to hire. You hired Joe Schoen because you wanted Brian Daboll, the guy who supposedly fixed Josh Allen, when I still think Joe Brady is the guy who's fixed Josh Allen. Because Joe Brady has had him more composed and had him more not looking to make the big throw necessarily when he's going to get intercepted. So you could have had him, and maybe you bring in Dan Quinn, and Dan Quinn, second time around, has looked much better as a head coach than he was in Atlanta. He looks like he's learned from his mistakes. So when you look at this division, the Commanders are on the rise. The Eagles are consistent every year. The Cowboys, Jerry Jones, regardless, is going to have a new head coach. And what are you? If you're the Giants, stuck in neutral at the best with a lame duck head coach, a lame duck GM, the hardest schedule next year, no quarterback. They're a mess. They're a mess because you can't, I don't even know how you root for anybody in this game if you're the Giants. If you're a Giants fan, you're rooting definitely for either Buffalo or Kansas City in the Super Bowl regardless. But everything that could go wrong for the Giants, to me, has gone wrong. And at least if you're the Jets, you look around the AFC and you kind of know what the AFC is. You kind of know that these are the quarterbacks left. And I would look at this era. I was watching the game last night and kind of came up with this. Patrick Mahomes is Tom Brady, regardless of what you want to feel with the officiating or whatever. To me, he's this generation's Brady. Josh Allen, I think, is this generation's Peyton Manning. And I would say Lamar Jackson, to me, is Aaron Rodgers. Because he's Aaron Rodgers to me because he's going to have potentially 3 MVPs. And Rodgers has 1 Super Bowl in his career to show for all his MVPs. Lamar hasn't even been to one yet. And it wasn't his fault yesterday. Mark Andrews had the fumble, the really bad drop. So in the 2-point conversion. So I can't say I sit here and blame him necessarily for those mistakes. But the sad reality is that is the mistakes. And that it speaks to an era with the Jets where you kind of know you're in a conference with Mahomes and Allen and Lamar and Burrow and Stroud's on the rise. The AFC is just filled with so many loaded quarterbacks. The Jets kind of know, hey, we have to work really hard to get where we got to go. The NFC is pretty weak. Weak in terms of quarterback structure. Where you look at Hurts, Stafford, who's getting up there in age, Jayden Daniels could quickly be the top quarterback in the NFC. Wouldn't be shocked by that in the least. So that was your path. So they're really disappointing there. Let's quickly turn to basketball. Knicks are going to be in action in just about an hour. They take on the Atlanta Hawks at the Garden. And the problem for the Knicks right now, they can't defend the 3-point line. They can't defend the 3-point line because you watch that game Friday against Minnesota, and the Timberwolves, even without Dante DiVincenzo, were hitting threes left and right. They've struggled in the last few games, and you look at teams like the Celtics and the Cavaliers, they can shoot the 3-pointers at will. And that's going to prevent the Knicks from beating these elite teams. I know Karl-Anthony Towns didn't play the other night. Their Knicks are hopeful that he'll play today along with Josh Hart, but they allow Anthony Edwards to go for 36 points. The Knicks are still looking to get something from their bench. Campaign gave him something the other night. He had 4 threes and 18 points. We'll see if Jericho Sims gets moved. The deadline, remember, for the trade deadline is February 6th, I believe. Yep, a few days before the Super Bowl. So that'll be something to monitor over the next 2 weeks is what the Knicks decide to do. They will have the Hawks tonight, the Nets tomorrow. That's a 7:30 game on TNT. They will be home to the Kings on Saturday. So 3 games with Knicks this week. Nets, meanwhile, they're still in kind of a mess. They got blown out by almost 60 points against the Clippers last Wednesday. They lose a close one to the Lakers on Friday. Last night, they get the doors blown off them by the Thunder by 26 in a game where Cam Johnson just struggled to hit anything. Well, he had 6 of 11 for 15 points, but the Nets as a whole shot 42%. And it just looks like, to me, that could have been Cam Johnson's audition for the Thunder last night, considering he's probably going to get dealt the next 2 weeks. Just a mess all around for the Brooklyn Nets. So we will see what's going on with that. So we'll take one more quick break. We'll come back. We'll talk some Rangers, some NHL. We'll talk some college basketball to wrap up this show. You're listening to New York State Sports and iSports Radio, your direct feed for all this sports. We'll be right back in just a minute.
Hockey fans, I'm Adam Kernick.
And I'm Zach Puplis.
Together, we are the newest version of Hockey Talk on IE Sports Radio, The Neutral Zone.
Zone.
We love hockey, but we also know it's not everyone's first sport. So we want to make this show as much for new fans as for the diehards.
Whether you can name all the Swedes on the 08 Red Wings Stanley Cup team, or if you can't tell if Varlamov is a goalie or the latest trendy vodka, we're here to help. With facts, figures, and outrageous fans, we bring you all the hard-hitting hockey news you can handle, while still keeping it fun and on the rails. Well, mostly.
So tune in every week as we go around the hockey world, from college to Canada, the minors and the majors, and everywhere in between.
So bring your cellies,
And your one-timers,
you wicked wristas.
and be sure to protect your 5-hole.
Catch the Neutral Zone every week on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
We promise not to pick on the Arizona Coyotes every episode.
Hey sports fans, are you in the market for Florida sports or just keeping up with the latest in the Panhandle? Palm Tree Sports is a dedicated audio hub to all things sports in the Sunshine State. We cover current events, big news, heavily favored opinions all across the NFL, NBA, MLB, and so much more. So come check us out every Saturday evening at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. For a down south education on Florida sports and athletics, it's hosted by yours truly, Corey Pujols, and is powered by IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Wrapping up our final segment here on New York State Sports, episode 74. Ricky K here with you for our grab bag segment, which is usually we throw a bunch of topics into the last segment and try to cover as much New York, New Jersey topics as we can. And let's start with the NHL. The Rangers starting to get their groove back a little bit. Now, since the new year, they have picked up a point in 9 of their last 10 games. This was a pivotal stretch here for the Rangers because they're playing teams that are right on their level. They're trying to make that push for a wild card spot, even though technically they're not out of the race for a top 3 in the Metro, but it's tough to see them getting that. But they picked up points at least. It started Saturday night where Igor put on another good show. He had 27 saves. Rangers could not get anything going against the Columbus goalie Tarasov, but they win 1-0 in a shootout thanks to the Trocheck goal. That was a big 2 points. Now, it was the second best outcome because you're chasing Columbus and you only gained 1 point on them instead of 2, but you'll take it. And then last night in Montreal, they had the lead 4 different times and just couldn't hold it. Canadians kept battling back. Patrick Laine, the goal in overtime against Jonathan Quick. So Quick has had 2 chances. He's had 3 chances to get his 400th win. 2 of those games they've lost in overtime, and both games they've had leads. Remember, he was the guy in the Dallas game where the Rangers led 3-0 and could not beat Dallas. So Jonathan Quick still waiting for that milestone. We'll see when he gets it. But the Rangers do get 3 points out of these 2 games, which is huge for them. You've seen talks about maybe JT Miller getting a reunion with him with Vancouver. So it sounds like the Rangers are going to be in buyer mode. Now, the deadline isn't until March. For the Rangers, as of right now, as we stand today, Sharks are in action against the Bruins. Rangers are chasing the Bruins. Rangers with 3 points behind Columbus for the final wild card spot. They are 4 points behind Ottawa for the first wild card spot, and they will get a chance to make up a couple points in Ottawa because they will play them at the Garden tomorrow. So Rangers, we talk about all these big games against teams they're chasing. They have Ottawa on Tuesday, and then they're tied with the Flyers in points, and they get them at the Garden at home on Thursday. So the Rangers really need to get these 2 games, or at least get a point in these 2 games, just to keep the positive momentum going. They will play Colorado Sunday afternoon at the Garden, so we'll see how that shakes out. Colorado, as we said, them and Carolina are really the only 2 teams they play the rest of this month that are, I think, significantly better than them. The Rangers had a chance to beat Colorado on the road and lost in overtime. So there is an opportunity to really make up some ground. And they do play Boston twice in the first 3 games in February. So these next 2 weeks are going to be very pivotal. Are the Rangers going to be buying, or are they going to be selling? Because these games will tell that. And they get Columbus the night before the Super Bowl on the road. So a lot of stuff the Rangers can get right in their favor if they have a good couple weeks. They are starting to find it in some way, shape, or form. We'll see if that continues. Devils, not so much. It's been a really interesting new year for the Devils. They've just not been able to find their form. Yesterday, they play Ottawa in a matinee, and they end up losing 2-1 to the point where Sheldon Keefe essentially saying, look, his Stars got to play better. Anton Forsberg had 25 saves for Ottawa yesterday. The only goal from the Devils comes from Tomas Tatar, his 4th of the year in the second period. And New Jersey's losing a lot of close games. They have not played a game that's been a margin of more than 2 goals since New Year's Day against the Kings. So they're in a lot of close battles, and they're just not getting it done. They lose the shootout to Florida. They lose in overtime to Toronto. They lose by 2 goals to the Flyers, that weird Saturday afternoon game. Bobby Brink picked up a goal for Philly, and the Devils only put up 12 shots. Like, this is a Devil team that's got to be able to – they've got great finesse. They've got great scoring with Hughes and Nisher and these guys. They've got to find a way to get those gritty goals and to grind games out when things aren't perfect. And that's something that this team's going to have to learn, because now the Devils are 9 points behind Washington for the top Metro spot, only 1 point ahead of Carolina for what would be a 2-3 matchup in the playoffs. And Columbus is catching up too. I mean, Columbus is 7 points behind. So not the margin number was about 14 points a couple weeks ago. It's down to 7. So not really good if you're a Devils fan wanting to see his team find it. They'll get Boston on Wednesday at home, and they're at Montreal, and then a home and home with the Flyers to end January. Not a good week for the Islanders either. Islanders really need to make some hay in this schedule. They are now in last place in the Metro with 43 points, and they did beat the Sharks last night 4-1. Matthew Barzal had a goal. Brock Nelson also had a goal in this one. Marcus Högberg, 18 saves, a really good performance by him. And the Islanders right now, they're just not getting those wins. Now, the Rangers could get some help from the Islanders. They beat Columbus tonight at home. They got the Flyers coming up on Friday, and then Carolina on Saturday. So this continues to be a really tough stretch for the Islanders. And all these home games, they had to make some hay. They had to get wins. They had to get points. And they just can't get that to happen. Now, good note for Brock Nelson this week. He became the 5th highest goal scorer in Islanders history, 288 goals. So congratulations to Nelson. He could be a guy that maybe gets moved at the deadline if the Islanders do decide to sell. And he has 16 goals behind Cam Gillies for 4th on the all-time list. We'll see if he gets a chance to actually get to 300 goals in an Islanders uniform. Moving on to college basketball, St. John's, as we mentioned, is now in the top 25 in the AP poll. They are 20th, and they are just finding ways to win games. Like, you talk about the game on Tuesday against Georgetown, where they got off to just an awful start. They couldn't get anything going, couldn't make any shots, and then their defense came to play. And this is one of the better second half teams in all of college basketball. They outscored Georgetown 36-21 in the second half en route to that 5-point win. RJ Lewis, who to me is becoming a first-team All-Big East player, 19 points, 3 boards. Aaron Scott gets 9 rebounds. And after Georgetown outmuscled them in the first half, St. John's was finding ways to create plays. Aaron Scott was finally hitting threes. He had 4 to lead the team. And even Rick Pitino mentioned after the game, the difference was the three-point line. St. John's got 24 points in the three-point line. Georgetown got 9. And that's a tough team. That Cooley's got a really good group. I know they lost to Paul the other day, but that's a good Georgetown team they went up against at home, a rivalry game. And to somehow steal that game, and the game looked like, hey, they're just going to have an off night. They came off the emotional win against Villanova, and they found a way to win. Then you go to Saturday, which was a really emotional game from the standpoint for Kadary Richmond. It was his return to the Prudential Center. And Seton Hall made like one of its first 20 shots. St. John's defense was on point, a 79-51 rout. Even when Seton Hall would get close, they just couldn't ever get anything going. Pirates as a whole shot 26%. It was just a really bad game. Isaiah Coleman, one of their best players, was 1 for 13. And that's St. John's had a good all-around attack. R.J. Lewis with 24 and 8 boards. Kadary Richmond had 12 points, 6 assists. Zuby Ejiofor had 15 and 9. Really good game. And Devion Smith did try to play. You could tell he's not quite right just yet. He had the shoulder injury against Georgetown. Fortunately, doesn't seem to be too serious. And look, this is a team that now, as of today, is in first place in the Big East. They haven't been in first place this late in the year since God rest his soul, Luke Hornseca in the mid-1980s. I mean, that's how special this group is, because this is a team that's doing something St. John's hasn't done in a long time. Now, what's their ceiling? We're going to find out. They have some interest. The only game they have this week is at home, Wednesday night against Xavier. Xavier's coming off a win at Marquette. St. John's just played Xavier back on January 7th. They won that game by 10, but even then, Xavier at the Cintas Center was a tough fight. Fremantle had a good game. So we'll see what Xavier brings and what could be a really statement win for them, because St. John's going to get used to one thing now. They're the hunted. They're not the hunters. How do they handle this success? They were ranked going into their neutral site tournament in the Bahamas, and they could not win against Baylor and could not win against Georgia. Can they stay now in the top 25? It's going to be the interesting part. They're ranked now, and that's what their goal was. And they saw 18 ranked teams lose this week, which was insane. That just shows what college basketball is. But the key, I think, to me, is going to be staying ranked going to these next 3 games. Xavier's a winnable game. Georgetown, even though it's on the road, is a winnable game. Providence, February 1st, a winnable game. And then the huge matchup, February 4th against Marquette, and then February 7th against UConn. Both other ranked teams in the Big East as they try to capture a Big East title. So congrats to Rick Pitino. Congrats to the Red Storm. Rick Pitino brought up a good point. It's sad for Seton Hall. He said, look, Kadary Richmond we got because we had NIL to give him. And Shaheen Holloway is finding out the hard way that, yes, Seton Holloway is a really good recruiter. Without the NIL, without that extra support, that means I don't really know if Shaheen Holloway is going to last that long at Seton Hall. Not because he's going to get fired. I think it's because some other big college team is going to grab him. I just don't know who that team is. Seton Hall is against Marquette Tuesday night on Peacock at home. And then Saturday they take on Creighton, who I think is the 4th best team in the Big East. So some rough goings for the Pirates. As for Rutgers, they are keeping themselves afloat. They still have ways to go to make that NCAA tournament bid as an at-large, but definitely put themselves in the right direction. They picked up a win over UCLA last Monday, 75-68. And they go on the road to Nebraska and get a road win, 85-82. Ace Bailey had 24 points and 11 boards. Dylan Harper had a strong game. He had 21 points and 5 boards, 8 of 17 shooting. Rutgers hit 12 threes, something you got to do on the road. You've got to hit those 3-point shots. They were able to do that. So they're 10-8, but they're in the Big Ten, starting to creep up there. They're 3-4 in the Big Ten, and you can get a couple of big ones this week, and they do have some big games starting tonight at Penn State. Penn State is favored by 7.5 of the Nittany Lions. They're struggling a little bit. Lost to Indiana. They had to come back to beat Northwestern on January 2nd. Lost to Illinois on January 8th. They got blown up almost 40. Lost to Michigan State. So Penn State's reeling. Mike Rhodes needs a big one. So Rutgers had a chance on the road. And then the huge one Saturday afternoon, 1:30 at the Garden. Michigan State, who's number 8 in the country, taking on Rutgers. That's to be the national stage for Harper and Bailey, 2 NBA draft kind of players, to try to make their impact and get a signature win for Rutgers. I mean, Rutgers at the Garden with the Big East, the only thing I remember really from Rutgers at the Garden was the whole stuff with St. John's and the controversy in the Big East tournament my freshman year in college. So for Rutgers to really have a chance to get their own signature moment on that floor could be something special for them. So we'll see what happens with that. Other teams to really look at locally, I'll give you 2 other teams. We'll start in the ACC with Syracuse, because we like to keep it kind of the big market picture. Syracuse did pick up a win Saturday against Notre Dame, 77-69. J.J. Starling has been a huge difference for them. They get back to 500. He had 21 points. Eddie Lampkin had 13. Cuse only made 8 threes, but Notre Dame only made 5. Spiking out, rebounded by almost 10. The Cuse were able to win that game. So their next opponents, they are going to play Clemson on Wednesday and then Pitt on Saturday at the Carrier Dome before they have to make a West Coast trip to Stanford as part of the ACC. And then remember last week we talked about Long Island as kind of that mid-major locally to keep an eye on. I want to spread some love to Marist. And you look at the Red Foxes, they're 13-3, and they're undefeated right now in the Metro Atlantic. Marist's only losses this season are to Harvard, Lehigh. It was 2 road games in November. And I believe they have a loss. Let me see if they are. So they actually have one. They do have a loss in conference. So they're not undefeated in conference. They lost to Rider on Saturday. But Marist, John Dunn's got a really good group going there. They're 6-1, 13-3 overall. So we gave Long Island some love. So we'll talk about Marist, who's trailing Quinnipiac by half a game as we get closer to non-conference play. And we got some action today out at the Prudential Center. And I think that's what's going to make this an interesting game to watch. If you're looking for something today, you got the Knicks on in the background. So we have the UCLA, who's number 1 in the country, 17-0. They're going to be taking on Baylor. That is the number 25 team in the country, 16-3. That game is a 3:00 Eastern game. I believe it is on Fox in the Loretta Scott King Classic. And I think it's a real interesting game. You look at UCLA, and this is a absolute complete team. Betts is averaging 19-9, so she's a really strong player. And this is we look at women's basketball. I mean, UCLA has got some really good wins. They've beaten Michigan, beaten Louisville. Trying to figure out, okay, who is the best team in college basketball, at least on the women's side. And we talk about Paige Buckets and we talk Paige Beckers, obviously, and Juju Watkins for USC. Maybe Betts puts herself into the picture here. So a marquee game at the Prudential Center to check out today if you're local in the area the next 45 minutes or so. So be sure to check that out. So as we wrap up this 74 of New York State of Sports, again, my thanks to Danielle McCartan from WFAN for hopping on the show. A lot of fun. So next week, we'll be looking ahead to the Super Bowl. We'll talk about the conference games from a local perspective, conference championship games. We'll see if the Jets get closer to a head coach and GM hire. We talked about Aaron Glenn potentially being that guy. If the Giants lose out on their offensive coordinator, they now have to go find a new coach as they have their offseason kind of begin to shuffle a little bit. St. John's, can they stay ranked? Big game at the Garden on Wednesday against Xavier. Trying to sweep them, get those quad 1, quad 2 wins. Can the Knicks bounce back? Pick up a couple of wins. Schedule's favorable this week. Technically 3 home games. You consider Brooklyn is essentially a second home for them. And a really winnable game for them tomorrow, even though it's a back-to-back. Rangers try to stay focused for the Islanders Devils. And next week on the show, we are going to react to the Rangers Islanders Devils. NHL.com is doing their quarter-century teams over the last 25 years. We'll talk about who are on those teams. Did they leave anybody off? Some interesting ones, including who gets picked in net for the Rangers over the last 25 years. Is it Lundqvist or is it Igor? Maybe we'll dive into that debate a little bit, but that should be a fun exercise. We'll talk about the Hall of Fame inductions, and we'll talk Pete Alonso. Still waiting for him to get a home. We said Toronto's got Santander. Do they still try to get Alonso? And can Mets and Pete actually work something out to where it looks like Pete did something? Those opt-outs, I'm sure the Mets don't want. Pete wants his options open. can they come to any kind of compromise that makes Alonso look good in the end? We will see. Thank you to all those who tuned in. It's been really, I think, kind of a record show. And it's a good way to keep the new year strong. So enjoy the sports this week. Stay warm. It is brutally cold here in the New York, New Jersey area. Be sure to monitor that. Stay tuned for a great lineup of shows today here on IE Sports Radio. Again, happy Martin Luther King Jr. Day to those who all out there today. So for Larry B and for all of us at IE Sports Radio, Mickey K, saying a great rest of your day, a great rest of your week, and I'll see you next time.